I watch a lot of movies.
Mad Max was released in 1979 and was directed by George Miller and stars Mel Gibson as Max. The film follows Max, a vengeful Australian policeman who sets out to stop a violent motorcycle gang in a self-destructing world. The film was not only Mel Gibson's breakout role, it was also the first feature film from George Miller. The film was shot over the course of 6 weeks in Australia, and depending on where you look, the budget of the film was estimated between $300,000 and $400,000. Since it was such a big hit, it would allow George Miller to have a majorly increased budget for future sequels. Now, over the years, this film and its sequels have gone on to become classics in film history. But is this film truly a classic, and is it as good as you remember it being? Well, here's my review for the one that started it all, Mad Max. Now, I want to start this by talking about how great the world building is in this film. Setting the film in the not-so-distant future does help the film, not only for budgetary reasons, but it also makes it feel a little bit closer to us and a little bit more personal feeling, and we're able to connect to it in a way that we might not be able to connect with some of the sequels. And that's certainly not to knock any of the sequels or anything. I think that's just something that makes this one feel a bit more unique and helps it stand out in this pack of films. But the way George Miller chose to build this world that looks relatively normal at face value, and then he peels back the layers and shows you that essentially everybody, well, pretty much everybody, is insane in this universe. And also setting this in the not-so-distant future, I think really helps to showcase how quickly society fell into chaos. Now, speaking of society and chaos, let's talk about the characters that we follow throughout this film. The film primarily follows the character Max, who's really one of the only relatively normal characters in the movie. He's an MFP officer, or Main Force Patrol officer, which is essentially the good side of society's last line of defense against the insane society. He's a hopeful character that wants to do good for his wife and his child and for the people around him, but the insane world just keeps pushing back. And we follow this character on a journey as he begins to lose hope for the world and as he goes on a quest for revenge. I think it's the perfect character and story arc for a film like this to really showcase the world that was built. Now, aside from Max, we also follow a villainous motorcycle gang as they travel across the country, wreaking havoc. Now, none of the gang members are really given much to do in terms of character. They're really just more so supposed to be a reflection of how chaotic society has become. But the clear standout of the gang is the gang's leader, with the hilarious and awesome name Toe Cutter, played by Hugh Keays-Byrne. He's really calm and unpredictable, which makes him really interesting when he's interacting with some of the other characters throughout the film. And there is a moment or two here where he is genuinely creepy, and a lot of that credit can go to Hugh's performance. And he's also one of the actors that George Miller would use more than once throughout the franchise, and thank God, because he's great. But more on that in another video. I don't think you can talk about any of the Mad Max films without at least mentioning the stunt work. Now, this film in particular is a bit lighter when it comes to the explosions and the car crashes and all of that when comparing it to its sequels, but that's not to detract from how great and well done the stunts and all of that are in this film. There really are some pretty thrilling sequences here that are a really nice early showcase of all of the amazing stunts and the amazing things that George will eventually be able to go on to pull off in later entries. Now, for this review, I really don't want to do too much comparing between this film and its sequels, but there is something that I'm a bit mixed on in this film. When you watch the other films in the franchise, it's hard not to come back to this one and not view it as almost a little bit quaint when comparing it to the others. I just think a lot of what he achieved with this film, while very impressive, especially for the time, he does much better in the sequels. So that's not really an issue with this film in particular. It's just time and newer entries have sort of dampened the experience of this movie. But I do have a couple issues with the film. I think Max's wife, Jessie, is not given enough to do in the film. She's a very important part of the plot as a character, but she isn't given enough other than a scene or two that she shares with Max that have any impact whatsoever, and so she feels very underwritten, which is really unfortunate because I want to care about her as a viewer, but the writers really don't give you enough to grab onto. But my major issue with the film that unfortunately really hurts the watch experience is I feel that the pacing and the structure is so strange and make it feel 30 to 45 minutes longer than the actual runtime that it is. At a really short runtime of about 90 minutes, the first act feels like it lasts basically the first half of the movie, and the second and third act come in the final half of the movie, and the third act payoff, I guess you could say, is only about 10 minutes, and so it makes the movie feel very disjointed. And due to it being disjointed like that, it almost makes it feel like it's two different movies split down the middle, where the first half is its own movie that feels incomplete, and the second half of it feels like a very quick 3-act structure, and it really does hurt the watch experience of the movie. And it's really unfortunate because I can recall watching this for the first time years ago, and I felt almost the exact same way that I do now, and I was really hoping that this time on rewatch I would have a revelation and kind of walk away differently from it, and unfortunately I did not. Overall, Mad Max is a flawed but solid introduction to Max as a character and this world that George Miller created. It's also a great foundation for the Road Warrior and the rest of the franchise to build off of. And I think despite its flaws, this film is definitely worth watching and worth appreciating for what George Miller was able to achieve with this. And if it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't have gotten the Road Warrior. But that's for another video. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button and please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you don't miss a thing from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.
I watch a lot of movies.